Can a single moment, a breath held too long, redefine an entire destiny? Can love, the most unpredictable of all forces, truly bloom from the ashes of betrayal and the dust of an impossible choice? Imagine a grand cathedral, hushed and expectant, bathed in the soft glow of stained glass light. The air thrummed with anticipation, the scent of lilies and polished wood intertwining. Every eye was fixed on the altar, where Elias Thorne, a man whose empire was built on steel and unwavering resolve, stood waiting. He was the epitome of success, a titan in the world of finance, yet today his power felt utterly insignificant. His gaze, usually sharp and calculating, was soft, almost vulnerable, as he watched the grand oak doors. This was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, the culmination of a whirlwind romance with Serafina, beautiful, enigmatic Serafina. But the minutes stretched, then bled into an eternity. A nervous cough rippled through the pews. The organist, poised to strike the triumphant chords of the bridal march, fidgeted. A whisper began to weave its way through the congregation, a delicate, dangerous thread of doubt. Elias's jaw tightened. His best man, Robert, a man whose loyalty was as unshakable as Elias's own ambition, leaned in, a worried frown creasing his brow. "Any word?" he murmured, his voice barely audible above the growing unease. Elias shook his head, his eyes still fixed on those unforgiving doors. His heart, usually a steady drum, had begun an erratic, disquieting rhythm. Where was she? Had something happened? 1,000 terrifying scenarios flashed through his mind, each more agonizing than the last. He was not a man accustomed to uncertainty, let alone public humiliation. His world was one of carefully constructed plans, of calculated risks and guaranteed outcomes. This was chaos. Then a ripple of movement at the back. Not Serafina, but her mother, clutching her husband's arm, her face a mask of bewildered panic. The whispers grew louder, bolder now, like a rising tide. The officiant, a kind-faced man who had known Elias since childhood, stepped forward, his expression grave. He cleared his throat, but before he could speak, a young woman, slender and almost ethereal in a simple, elegant gown that was clearly not a bridal dress, detached herself from the family huddle. Her name was Lyra, Serafina's younger sister. She moved with a quiet grace, her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, fixed on Elias. There was a fierce determination in her gaze, a vulnerability that belied the strength radiating from her. Her presence was a stark contrast to the grandiosity of the setting, a single delicate flame in a vast, echoing space. She reached the altar, her voice, though soft, carrying with an unexpected clarity through the sudden, stunned silence. "Serafina, she's not coming," Lyra said, her words a stark, brutal pronouncement. Collective gasps swept through the church. Elias felt the air leave his lungs, a cold, crushing weight settling in his chest. "Not coming." The words echoed hollow and final. Betrayal, humiliation, the sheer, unfathomable audacity of it. He stared at Lyra, his mind reeling, struggling to process the enormity of her statement. He barely knew Lyra. She was the quiet one, the shadow to Serafina's vibrant light, an artist who preferred the solitude of her studio to the glittering social scene her sister commanded. He had always seen her as a child, a gentle artistic soul who drifted through life, seemingly oblivious to the cutthroat world he inhabited. Yet, standing before him now, she was anything but a child. There was a maturity in her eyes, a quiet strength that he had never noticed before. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the distant murmur of traffic outside and the frantic beating of Elias's own heart. He was a man accustomed to control, to making decisions with surgical precision. But in this moment, stripped bare of his carefully constructed facade, he felt utterly lost. The weight of expectation, the stares of the hundreds of guests, felt like a physical burden. He could feel the pity, the schadenfreude, the inevitable whispers of poor Elias that would follow him for years. This wasn't just a cancelled wedding. It was a public execution of his pride. Then, Lyra took a step closer, her hand extended, a gesture of unexpected comfort. Her voice, still soft but imbued with an astonishing conviction, broke the spell. "I could be your bride," she said, her eyes meeting his, unwavering. The words hung in the air, audacious, impossible, yet utterly compelling. A collective gasp, even louder this time, erupted from the pews. Robert, ever the pragmatist, looked as if he might spontaneously combust. Elias, however, felt a strange jolt, not of anger, not of disbelief, but of something akin to possibility. It was a desperate, illogical thought, born of shock and a visceral need to reclaim some semblance of control, to wipe the smug, pitying looks from the faces of his guests. But it was there, a flickering ember in the ashes of his ruined day. His gaze swept over the congregation, seeing the confusion, the shock, the barely concealed delight of those who thrived on scandal. He saw the genuine distress on the faces of his closest friends, the knowing glances of his business rivals. He could walk away, of course. He could retreat, nurse his wounds in solitude. But Elias Thorne had never backed down from a challenge, never surrendered to defeat. He had built his empire on audacity, on making the impossible possible. And in that moment, fueled by a potent cocktail of hurt pride, desperation, and a flicker of something he couldn't quite name, he made a decision that would forever alter the course of his life. He looked at Lyra, truly looked at her, for the first time. Her simple dress, her unbound hair, her eyes that held a quiet storm. She wasn't Serafina, not in beauty, not in temperament, not in ambition. She was something else entirely, something real. "You would?" he asked, his voice rough, barely a whisper. She nodded, her chin lifting slightly, a defiant courage in her posture. "Yes," she said, "I would," and in that impossible, improbable moment Elias Thorne, the man who had everything, made the most impulsive, and perhaps the most profound decision of his life. He took her hand. The gasps that followed were a symphony of disbelief, a crescendo of shock that reverberated through the grand cathedral. Elias felt the tremor in Lyra's hand as he held it, a testament to the enormity of the moment, the sheer audacity of their shared decision. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, saw not the quiet, unassuming sister, but a woman of unexpected strength, a quiet fire burning beneath her calm exterior. The officiant, a man who had presided over countless weddings, looked utterly bewildered, his mouth agape. Robert, Elias's best man and closest confidant, finally found his voice, a strangled whisper that only Elias could hear. "Elias, what are you doing?" But Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. His gaze was locked with Lyra's, a silent promise, a shared plunge into the unknown. The decision, born of impulse and a desperate need to reclaim dignity, felt strangely right in that chaotic moment. It was a defiant act, a refusal to be broken by betrayal. He would not be the jilted groom, the object of pity. He would be the man who turned disaster into destiny. He turned to the officiant, his voice, when it came, clear and resonant, cutting through the stunned silence. "Proceed," he commanded, his grip on Lyra's hand tightening reassuringly. The officiant, still visibly shaken, slowly regained his composure. He cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the marriage license, then glancing between Elias and Lyra, a flicker of understanding, or perhaps just resignation, in his gaze. He began the ceremony, the familiar words taking on an almost surreal quality in the charged atmosphere. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words, usually a prelude to joy, felt like a defiant pronouncement against the backdrop of shattered expectations. Lyra, throughout the impromptu ceremony, remained remarkably composed. Her voice, when she spoke her vows, was soft but clear, imbued with an earnestness that surprised Elias. He, in turn, found himself speaking his vows with a conviction he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the passionate declaration he had rehearsed for Serafina, but something deeper, more grounded in the present, in the shared understanding of their impossible situation. The ring, a magnificent diamond meant for Serafina, felt heavy, almost symbolic, as he slid it onto Lyra's finger. It was a ring meant for a grand, public love, and now it adorned the hand of a woman he barely knew, a woman who had, with one audacious offer, rescued him from the brink of utter humiliation. The kiss, when it came, was hesitant, chaste, a mere brush of lips. It was a formality, a sealing of the unexpected pact they had made. But even in that fleeting contact, Elias felt a spark, a nascent curiosity about the woman who was now his wife. The pronouncement, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," echoed through the stunned church. The silence that followed was different this time, filled not with shock, but with a strange, hesitant hope. The guests, slowly, awkwardly, began to rise. A smattering of applause, led by Robert, who, despite his initial shock, had quickly rallied to his friend's side, broke the spell. Elias, still holding Lyra's hand, turned to face the congregation. He saw a kaleidoscope of emotions: confusion, curiosity, a few genuine smiles of support, and the inevitable, speculative glances. This was not the wedding he had planned, not the bride he had chosen, but it was done. And in its very unconventionality, there was a strange, undeniable power. As they walked back down the aisle, a newly married couple bound by an act of desperation and defiance, Elias felt a sense of calm settle over him. The immediate crisis was averted. The humiliation, though not entirely erased, had been transformed into something else, something intriguing. He glanced at Lyra, her profile serene, her eyes downcast. She was a complete unknown, a blank canvas. And for a man whose life was meticulously planned, the prospect of the unknown, for the first time, felt less like a threat and more like an adventure. The reception, held at Elias's sprawling estate, was a muted affair, a stark contrast to the lavish celebration that had been meticulously planned. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with the hum of speculative whispers. Elias, ever the pragmatist, made a brief, concise speech, acknowledging the unexpected turn of events, and expressing his gratitude to Lyra for stepping in. His words were carefully chosen, devoid of overt emotion, a shield against the probing gazes. Lyra, standing beside him, offered a small, shy smile to the guests, her presence a quiet counterpoint to Elias's imposing aura. She spoke little, but her composure, her quiet dignity, began to subtly shift the atmosphere. People, initially stunned, found themselves drawn to her unassuming grace. Robert, ever loyal, raised a toast, his voice firm, to Elias and Lyra. May their journey together be filled with unexpected joys. The words, though seemingly generic, held a deeper meaning for those who understood the day's extraordinary events. The evening wore on, a surreal blur of polite congratulations and hesitant conversations. Elias found himself observing Lyra, trying to decipher the woman who was now his wife. She moved through the crowd with quiet elegance, engaging in brief, polite exchanges, never seeking the spotlight, yet never shrinking from it either. He saw her speaking with his formidable Aunt Eleanor, a woman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper judgments, and was surprised to see a rare smile grace his aunt's lips. Later, as the last guests departed, the vast mansion felt suddenly cavernous, the silence amplified by the day's events. Elias found Lyra in the grand ballroom, gazing out at the moonlit gardens, her wedding gown, the one meant for Serafina, shimmering softly in the dim light. She looked small, almost fragile, in the vastness of the room, yet there was a quiet strength in her posture. "Lyra," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She turned, her eyes wide, a flicker of vulnerability in their depths. "Elias," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling inadequate yet necessary. "For today. For everything." She offered a small, self-deprecating smile. I couldn't bear to see you standing there, alone." It was a simple statement, yet it resonated deeply with Elias. He had been alone, truly alone, despite the hundreds of guests. Her act had been one of unexpected compassion, a selfless gesture in a world often devoid of such things. "Why?" he asked, his curiosity finally getting the better of him. "Why did you do it?" She hesitated, her gaze drifting back to the moonlit garden. "Serafina, she always wanted the grand life, the attention. I just wanted a purpose. And today, I saw a man who needed help. A man who deserved better than to be humiliated." Her words struck him. Purpose. He understood that. His own life was driven by purpose, by ambition. But hers was a different kind of purpose, one rooted in empathy rather than acquisition. "What do you want, Lyra?" he asked, his voice low, searching. "From this? From me?" She turned back to him, her eyes meeting his, earnest and direct. "I want a chance to build something real. Not a grand love, not a fairy tale. Just something honest." Elias felt a shift within him. The anger, the humiliation, the shock of the day began to recede, replaced by a nascent respect for this woman, his wife. She wasn't demanding, wasn't manipulative. She was simply honest. "Then we will build something real," he said, his voice firm. A promise made in the quiet solitude of their unexpected wedding night. Together he extended his hand, not as a husband to a wife, but as two strangers embarking on an uncharted journey. She took it, her touch light yet firm. And in that moment, under the silent gaze of the moon, Elias Thorne, the man who had always sought control, surrendered to the beautiful, terrifying uncertainty of an unplanned future. The initial weeks of their marriage were a delicate dance of two strangers navigating an intimately shared space. Elias, accustomed to solitude and the precise rhythms of his own life, found Lyra's presence to be a quiet, yet persistent, disruption. He observed her, learning her habits. The way she meticulously organized her art supplies, the soft hum she made while sketching, her preference for herbal tea over his strong coffee. She, in turn, moved through his vast home with a respectful deference, never overstepping, yet slowly, subtly, imprinting her own gentle mark. Her studio, a previously unused sunroom, became a vibrant hub of creativity, filled with the scent of turpentine and the soft rustle of canvases. Elias, a man whose world was built on numbers and logic, found himself drawn to the abstract beauty of her work, the raw emotion she poured onto the canvas. He'd often find himself lingering at the doorway, watching her, a flicker of something akin to fascination stirring within him. "What are you painting today?" he'd ask, his voice gruff, betraying his growing interest. Lyra would turn, a soft smile gracing her lips, and explain her current project, her passion for art radiating from her. She spoke of light and shadow, of emotion and form, in a way that began to open Elias's eyes to a different kind of language, a different way of seeing the world. Their conversations, initially stilted and formal, slowly began to deepen. They spoke of their pasts, Lyra revealing glimpses of a childhood overshadowed by her more flamboyant sister, a life spent in quiet observation. Elias, in turn, found himself sharing details of his own upbringing, the relentless drive that had propelled him to the pinnacle of success, the loneliness that often accompanied his achievements. He discovered that beneath Lyra's quiet exterior lay a keen intellect, a sharp wit, and a profound empathy that surprised him. She listened to him, truly listened, offering insights that often made him pause, forcing him to consider perspectives he had previously overlooked. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the office, Elias found Lyra in the library, a thick tome on art history open on her lap. He slumped into an armchair opposite her, rubbing his temples. "Another long day?" she asked, her voice soft, empathetic. He nodded, letting out a weary sigh. "A board meeting from hell. Old man Henderson still thinks we should be investing in typewriters," Lyra chuckled, a melodic sound that brought a rare smile to Elias's face. "Perhaps he's just nostalgic for a simpler time." "There's nothing simple about business, Lyra," he countered, though without his usual edge. "It's a constant battle, a war of attrition." She closed her book, her gaze thoughtful. "But isn't there also beauty in the struggle? In creating something from nothing, in shaping the future. Her words struck him. He had always seen his work as a conquest, a victory. But Lyra saw it as creation, as a form of art in itself. It was a subtle shift in perspective, but a profound one. Perhaps, he admitted, a rare vulnerability in his voice. Perhaps you're right, the physical intimacy between them remained largely unexplored. A silent agreement to allow their emotional connection to develop first. They slept in separate rooms, a practical arrangement that suited their initial awkwardness. Yet, there were moments, fleeting glances, accidental touches, that hinted at a deeper, unspoken current beneath the surface. One morning, Elias woke to the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the soft sound of Lyra singing in the kitchen. He found her humming to herself as she prepared breakfast, a simple meal of eggs and toast. She looked up as he entered, her smile genuine and warm. "Good morning," she said, her eyes bright. "I hope you don't mind." I took the liberty. He didn't mind. He found himself looking forward to these quiet mornings, to the unexpected domesticity that had crept into his solitary life. He sat at the kitchen island, watching her, a strange sense of contentment settling over him. It was a feeling he hadn't known before, a warmth that had nothing to do with ambition or success, but everything to do with connection. One evening, a few months into their marriage, Elias returned home to find Lyra in the living room, a stack of old photo albums spread across the coffee table. He saw pictures of Serafina, vibrant and glamorous, and then, nestled among them, younger, more hesitant versions of Lyra. "You look through these often?" he asked, his voice neutral. She shook her head. "Not really. I was just organizing, trying to make sense of things." She picked up a photo of a much younger Serafina, radiant and smiling, arm in arm with a handsome older man. Elias recognized him as one of Serafina's previous, wealthy boyfriends. "She was always chasing something, wasn't she?" Lyra mused, her voice devoid of bitterness, only a quiet understanding. Always searching for the next big thing, the next grand adventure. Elias thought of the note Serafina had left, a brief, impersonal message explaining her sudden departure, her need for freedom, and a life unburdened by expectations. He had been hurt, angry. But now, looking at Lyra, he understood. Serafina had been chasing a dream, a fantasy, while Lyra, in her quiet way, was building something real. "And you?" Elias asked, his gaze softening as he looked at Lyra. "What are you chasing?" She met his gaze, her eyes earnest. "Truth, beauty, and a home." The word home resonated deep within Elias. His mansion had always been just a house, a symbol of his achievements. But with Lyra's presence, it was slowly, subtly transforming into something more. It was becoming a home. That night, as he lay in his bed, Elias found himself reflecting on the unexpected trajectory of his life. He had married a stranger out of desperation, out of a need to salvage his pride. But in the quiet, unassuming grace of Lyra, he was discovering a connection he had never anticipated, a depth of feeling that was slowly, inexorably, beginning to bloom. The seeds of genuine love, planted in the most infertile of grounds, were beginning to take root. As the seasons shifted, so too did the dynamic between Elias and Lyra. The initial awkwardness gave way to a comfortable familiarity, a shared rhythm that hummed beneath the surface of their lives. Elias found himself increasingly relying on Lyra's quiet counsel, her ability to see situations with a clarity that often eluded him in the cutthroat world of business. He'd bring home complex reports, dense with financial jargon, and she, with her artist's eye for patterns and her intuitive grasp of human nature, would often pinpoint the underlying issues with startling accuracy. "It's not just about the numbers, Elias," she'd say, tracing a line on a spreadsheet with her finger. "It's about the people behind them. What are their motivations? What are their fears?" Her perspective was a refreshing counterpoint to his own, a blend of logic and empathy that began to subtly influence his decision-making. He found himself becoming a more thoughtful leader, considering the human cost of his choices, a change that surprised even his most seasoned colleagues. Robert, ever observant, remarked, "You've softened, Elias. Not in a weak way, but in a more human way. It suits you, Elias would simply grunt in response. But inwardly, he knew Robert was right. Lyra was slowly, gently, chipping away at the impenetrable fortress he had built around himself. Their evenings, once spent in separate pursuits, began to merge. Lyra would often join him in his study, sketching quietly while he worked, the soft scratch of her pencil a soothing backdrop to his own focused concentration. Sometimes, he'd read aloud from a business journal, and she'd offer unexpected insights, her mind connecting disparate ideas in ways he never would have imagined. He, in turn, found himself drawn into her artistic world. She taught him to truly see, to appreciate the interplay of light and shadow, the subtle nuances of color. He started noticing the way the sunlight fell on the ancient oak in their garden, the vibrant hues of a sunset, the intricate patterns in a simple leaf. His world, once defined by profit margins and market trends, was slowly expanding, enriched by her artistic vision. One afternoon, Lyra was working on a large canvas in her studio, a vibrant abstract piece that seemed to pulse with energy. Elias entered, a rare smile on his face. "That's beautiful, Lyra," he said, genuinely moved by the raw emotion emanating from the painting. She turned, her eyes bright. "It's a reflection of how I feel." Hopeful, he walked closer, his gaze sweeping over the canvas. "What does it mean?" She gestured to a swirl of deep blues and purples. "That's the chaos, the uncertainty. The day we met." Then she pointed to a radiant burst of gold and crimson at the center. "And that's the unexpected warmth, the new beginning." He looked at her, truly seeing her, not just as his wife, but as an individual of profound depth and talent. "You see beauty in everything, don't you?" he asked, a hint of awe in his voice. She smiled. "It's always there, Elias. Sometimes you just have to look a little harder." The turning point in their physical relationship came subtly, organically. It wasn't a grand, romantic gesture, but a quiet evolution of their growing emotional intimacy. One stormy evening, a power outage plunged the mansion into darkness. Lyra, initially startled, found Elias by the fireplace, calmly lighting candles. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls, transforming the grand room into a cozy, intimate space. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low, concern etched on his face. She nodded, a shiver running down her spine, not from cold, but from the sudden, intense awareness of his presence. Just a little startled, he extended a hand, a silent offer of comfort. She took it, her fingers intertwining with his, a spark igniting between them that had nothing to do with the electricity. They sat by the fire, talking in hushed tones, sharing stories from their pasts, their voices weaving together in the flickering light. As the night deepened, a comfortable silence settled between them. Elias, without thinking, reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, hesitant, yet filled with an unspoken tenderness. Lyra leaned into it, her eyes meeting his, a silent question passing between them. He leaned closer, and this time, when their lips met, it was not a formality, but a slow, deliberate exploration. It was a kiss born of shared understanding, of quiet respect, of a blossoming affection that had been nurtured in the fertile ground of their unexpected union. It was a kiss that promised not fireworks, but a steady, enduring warmth. That night, they didn't return to their separate rooms. They found solace and comfort in each other's arms, their bodies finally catching up to the emotional intimacy they had already forged. It was a quiet, profound act of love, a testament to the fact that true connection could bloom in the most unconventional of circumstances. Their love story wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a slow-burning ember, steadily growing into a roaring flame. It was built on respect, on shared values, on the quiet understanding that had developed between them. Elias, the man who had once been defined by his ambition and his carefully constructed control, was discovering a new kind of wealth, a richness of spirit he hadn't known was possible. Lyra, the quiet artist who had always lived in the shadow of her sister, was finally stepping into her own light, cherished and seen for the extraordinary woman she was. Their marriage, born of desperation and defiance, had transformed into something profound, something beautiful, a testament to the unpredictable, transformative power of love. As their love deepened, so too did the challenges they faced, not from within their relationship, but from the world outside, a world that still remembered the scandal of their wedding day. The media, ever hungry for a story, had not forgotten the dramatic circumstances of Elias Thorne's marriage. Rumors and speculation continued to swirl, fueled by Serafina's conspicuous absence and Lyra's sudden, unexpected prominence. Many whispered that Lyra was a gold digger, an opportunist who had seized her sister's chance. Elias, ever protective, shielded Lyra from the worst of it, but the whispers were insidious, threatening to undermine the fragile peace they had built. One evening, a particularly scathing article appeared in a prominent tabloid, painting Lyra as a manipulative schemer and Elias as a fool. Lyra, usually so resilient, was visibly shaken. Elias found her in her studio, staring at the article, her eyes clouded with hurt. "It's not true, Elias," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You know it's not true." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "I know, Lyra, and it doesn't matter what they say. What matters is what we know, what we feel." But the words, though comforting, couldn't entirely erase the sting of public judgment. The antagonist in their story, a skeptical gatekeeper in the form of Elias's most formidable board member, Reginald Sterling, seized on the opportunity. Sterling, a man of old money and even older prejudices, had always viewed Elias's rise with a grudging respect, but he saw Lyra as an unwelcome intrusion, an unrefined artist who threatened the carefully curated image of the Thorne Empire. He began to subtly undermine Elias's authority, questioning his judgment in board meetings, hinting that his personal life was affecting his business acumen. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling would often intone, his voice dripping with condescension, "perhaps your unconventional domestic arrangements are clouding your strategic vision." Elias, usually unshakable, found himself increasingly frustrated. He knew Sterling was not just attacking Lyra, but also using her as a weapon against him. The pressure mounted, both professionally and personally. One day, Sterling called for an emergency board meeting, ostensibly to discuss a major acquisition, but Elias knew the true agenda. It was a vote of no confidence, a calculated move to force him out, or at least to strip him of his power. "This is about Lyra, isn't it?" Elias confronted Sterling in his office, his voice low and dangerous. Sterling simply smiled, a chilling, humorless expression. "It's about the integrity of this company, Mr. Thorne. We cannot afford to have our leadership compromised by scandal." Elias walked out, a cold fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. He knew he had to fight, not just for his company, but for Lyra, for their future. He found Lyra in her studio, her face pale, her eyes worried. He told her about Sterling's machinations, about the impending board meeting. "I won't let him do this, Lyra," he vowed, his hand gripping hers. "I won't let him hurt you." Lyra, however, surprised him. Perhaps I can help," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. Elias looked at her, skepticism in his eyes. "How?" "Sterling underestimates me, just like he underestimates you," she said, a spark of defiance in her gaze. "He sees me as a weakness, but sometimes the quiet ones are the most observant." She had been listening, watching, absorbing the nuances of Elias's business world. She had seen the subtle shifts in power, the unspoken alliances, the vulnerabilities of his rivals. She had, in her artistic way, been sketching the intricate dynamics of his corporate empire. Lyra proposed a strategy to use Sterling's own arrogance against him. She had noticed a pattern in his investments, a tendency to overextend himself in certain ventures, blinded by his own hubris. She had seen the subtle signs of his impending financial overreach, a weakness that Elias, caught in the daily battles, had missed. Together, they meticulously gathered information, Lyra's intuitive insights complementing Elias's analytical mind. They worked late into the nights, a shared purpose uniting them against a common foe. Lyra, with her keen eye for detail, uncovered a crucial piece of information. A hidden clause in one of Sterling's major investment deals that would expose him to significant financial risk if a particular market trend shifted. It was a detail so subtle, so easily overlooked, that only someone with Lyra's unique perspective could have found it. The day of the board meeting arrived, charged with tension. Sterling, confident in his victory, presented his case, detailing Elias's reckless personal choices and his waning leadership. Elias listened, his face impassive, while Lyra sat quietly in the back, her presence a silent act of support. When it was Elias's turn to speak, he didn't defend himself against Sterling's personal attacks. Instead, he systematically dismantled Sterling's own financial strategies, laying bare his vulnerabilities, his over-leveraged positions, and the hidden clause that threatened to unravel his carefully constructed empire. He presented the information with precision, with an almost surgical coldness, but his eyes, when they met Lyra's, held a silent gratitude. Sterling, initially smug, grew increasingly pale as Elias revealed the extent of his financial precariousness. The other board members, initially swayed by Sterling's rhetoric, began to shift in their seats, their faces reflecting dawning realization. Elias concluded his presentation with a powerful statement, not about himself but about the future of the company, about the importance of integrity and foresight. He didn't mention Lyra directly, but his words, imbued with a newfound depth and empathy, subtly acknowledged her influence. The vote, when it came, was a resounding victory for Elias. Sterling was not only defeated but humiliated, his own arrogance leading to his downfall. He resigned from the board, his power effectively neutralized. After the meeting, as the board members dispersed, offering Elias their renewed support, he found Lyra waiting for him outside the boardroom. Her eyes were shining, a mixture of relief and pride. "You did it, Elias," she said, her voice filled with admiration. He took her hand, his gaze warm and direct. "We did it, Lyra. You showed me what I was missing in that moment." The last vestiges of doubt, of public judgment, began to fade. Their marriage, born of crisis, had not only endured but had been forged stronger in the fires of adversity. Lyra, the quiet artist, had proven her worth, not just as Elias's wife, but as his intellectual equal, his trusted partner. The underdog had found her voice, and the powerful outsider had found his true ally. The victory over Sterling marked a profound shift in Elias and Lyra's relationship, solidifying their bond and silencing the last of the skeptics. The board, now fully aware of Lyra's quiet intelligence and astute observations, began to treat her with a newfound respect. She was no longer just Elias's wife, but an invaluable, if unofficial, advisor. Elias, for his part, became more open, more vulnerable with Lyra. He sought her counsel not just on business matters, but on personal ones, sharing his fears, his dreams, his deepest aspirations. He found in her a confidant, a true partner who saw beyond his formidable exterior to the man beneath. Their love story, once a whisper of possibility, had blossomed into a vibrant, undeniable reality. They found joy in the simple things: quiet evenings spent reading together, long walks in the garden, the shared laughter over a silly joke. Lyra's art flourished, her canvases reflecting the peace and contentment she had found. Elias, once a workaholic, learned to slow down, to appreciate the beauty of life beyond the boardroom. He began to see the world through Lyra's eyes, finding wonder in the mundane, beauty in the everyday. Their home, once a grand, impersonal mansion, was now filled with warmth, with the scent of Lyra's paints, the sound of her music, the tangible presence of their shared life. The separate bedrooms became a distant memory, replaced by a shared sanctuary where they found solace and intimacy. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elias found Lyra in her studio, putting the finishing touches on a new painting. It was a portrait, not of a person, but of their home, bathed in the golden light of sunset, a warm, inviting glow emanating from its windows. "It's perfect," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "It's us," she turned, her eyes shining, It's home, Elias. It's truly home. He walked over to her, taking her hands. You made it home, Lyra. You made me home. He pulled her close, and they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the quiet hum of their love filling the sun-drenched studio. He thought of the day they met, the chaos, the humiliation, the impulsive decision that had changed everything. He wouldn't trade it for anything. He wouldn't trade Lyra for anything. Their life together was a testament to the power of unexpected connections, to the idea that love could bloom in the most unlikely of places, transforming heartbreak into a profound and lasting joy. Lyra, the quiet artist, had not only found her purpose, but had helped Elias find his, a purpose far richer and more meaningful than any empire he could build. He had found not just a wife, but a soulmate, a true partner who saw him, understood him, and loved him for who he truly was. Their love story was a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the most unexpected steps, and that true love, in its purest form, is often found where you least expect it. It was a love story that defied expectations, a modern fairy tale forged in the fires of reality, proving that the most beautiful masterpieces are often born from the most unexpected canvases.